Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CRE PN Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is J. Darren Gross. This is the podcast focused on commercial real estate investment and risk management strategies. Weekly, we have conversations with commercial real estate investors and professionals who provide their experience and insight to help you grow your real estate portfolio. Today's program is sponsored by Building Insurance and Risk. Don't put your real estate investment in peril. Work with Building Insurance and Risk and receive multiple coverage offers with a side-by-side coverage comparison. To learn more, go to buildinginsuranceRisk.com. Today, my guest is Oliver Fernandez. Oliver is a business owner and real estate investor that has successfully completed over $80 million worth of construction projects and accumulated a real estate investment portfolio valued at $150 million in the past 9 years. And in just a minute, we're going to speak with Oliver about adding value through quality construction in multifamily real estate. But first, a quick reminder, if you like our show, CRE PN Radio, there are a couple things you can do to help us out. You can like, share, and subscribe. And as always, you can leave a comment. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Also, if you'd like to see how handsome our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network. And while you're there, please subscribe. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Oliver Fernandez. Welcome to CRE PN Radio.
Thank you, Darren. I'm super excited to be here with you guys today.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation. But before we get started, if you could take just a minute and share with the listeners a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So the reason why I got into real estate was when I was a kid growing up, my dad was in construction and my uncle focused mainly on real estate. And he was buying single family homes and converting them into duplexes and triplexes. Then he was also buying 3, 4, 5, 8 family properties. And I saw that he continued to grow with it. I saw that when something tragic happened in his life and he ended up passing away, that real estate took care of his 2-year-old son at the time, who's now 22, but it took care of his son while he wasn't here anymore. So that really left a massive impact on my life, especially in comparison to watching my dad, building a construction company and taking the risk that construction has involved in it. And not having the same results as my uncle. So my uncle bought that real estate, and that real estate took care of his son for the last 20 years. And obviously his mom did a really good job with him as well. But that real estate definitely helped out in the process. And it really inspired me to, get into real estate and understand more about real estate when I was coming up. And then I went to school, and my first job that I got out of school was for a company in Atlanta, Georgia. And while I was at that job, I was also taking some night classes. And during those night classes, one of the instructors, who was a person that taught classes at nighttime, but also worked in the real world during the day, which is always the best teachers. And he recommended that I read this book, the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. And in that book, it totally rearranged the furniture in my head, where it was here I was, I wanted to take care of my mom, I wanted to take care of my sisters. And now I had this job that I thought was going to be able to do that. But after paying my student loans and paying for my living expenses, I didn't have much money left over. And I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do. So I was reading that book gave me the framework. Well, I got to get to the right side of the quadrant, like real estate, businesses, and moving in that direction. And that company, I was living in Atlanta working for them, and they offered me a position to move down to Savannah, Georgia. And I was in the middle of those night classes, and I really didn't want to go, and I ended up telling them that, and they ended up laying me off the next week or whatever. And that was like a pivotal changing point in my career, because it was before I was kind of shielded by someone else's boat, and now I was in the water by myself. and I needed to figure out what I was going to do, and I needed to figure out quick because I didn't have, any additional resource, and I had some pretty big debts from school, that were due. So that's when I got into taking action on building my real estate portfolio, and it originally started with a single family home. I went in and I worked with every one of the trades, like the electrician, the plumber, the drywall people. I worked with every one of those trades. So I wanted to understand the business. I wanted to understand how to like put these things together. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to understand that is because prior to buying that single family, I had owned this condo and it was fully renovated. And I walked in and, it was totally, everything was done for me. And I bought that at the top of the market. And I realized that when you buy something at the top of the market and you don't add any value to that, what happens when the market actually goes down is that all of a sudden you're underwater. Whereas if you've gone in and you've added value to this thing, you could still be in a good situation with the property. So working on that single family home, I knew I wanted to get good at this construction thing because I knew that later on in life, I would be able to not be in a bad position from purchasing real estate because I could actually go in and add value to these properties. So that knowledge that I took from that single family property is what I've now used to go in, and we bought over 1,500 units. We've renovated them. We've done a value add strategy to them. We've done really cool things from a construction value creation, cash flow creation standpoint. And that's where we're at today.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your background like that. The aha when it happens, it's pretty powerful, especially when you see, kind of the way that you've done it or that others have done it and haven't had success versus the way you can do it and actually, create that equity or that value. That's great. So let me ask you, so the 1,500 units, you mentioned you started with the single family. Are you buying multiple family properties, single family properties? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, our focus now is 100+ unit properties. We bought a 182 unit property in Atlanta, Georgia. We got a 128 unit property in Daytona Beach, Florida. So we're buying and we're focusing on 100+ unit properties now. But that single family game is where I learned like valuable skills, that I'm now implementing, but just on a larger scale.
Gotcha. And so the title, kind of the topic here, was adding value through quality construction. The word quality kind of stood out in my mind. Tell me what you mean by quality. Is it level of finishings? Is it what is it you're doing to create a quality construction project?
Well, a lot of the stuff that we're buying is not brand new. It's typically 1980s build, 1970s build, some early, late 2000 or 1990s build. So we're not buying the best of stuff, but we're buying stuff that a lot of America lives in, and they want to be proud of the place they live in, just the way someone who lives in a Class A beautiful building wants to be proud of what they live in. So when we'll use the word quality, it's like a place that someone can call home, that they can be proud of, that it's not like a crappy job. And I just use this basic analogy, and I've used this analogy on basically the $80 million worth of construction we've done to date. And it's what I want that done at my mom's house. And if the answer is yes, we're good to go. If the answer is no, we got to tear that out and we're going to do it the right way. And we're going to make it so that someone that rents this place, or someone that is deciding to raise their kids there or raise their family in this place, that they're going to be proud of it through the workmanship that we've done at that property.
Got it. So you mentioned that you're not doing ground up construction, correct?
We're not doing ground up construction. We when we first got into like the multifamily space, 2, 3, 4 unit properties, we were doing like gut renovation projects where we'd go in, we would we'd tear down the back of the house, extend it back. We'd also dig out the basement so that we could put a unit down there, and then we'd also go up a level. So that was that was a lot of work that went into that. And what I realized when we were doing that is that I was taking on a tremendous amount of risk. Like, those projects would take, a year to 2 years to really get to the finish line. And during that year to 2 years of doing that construction, there was no income coming in. Everything was going out the door. We were paying for the drywall, we were paying for the flooring, we were paying for the windows, we were paying for everything. It was going out the window. We were even paying the taxes. Whereas now we're investing in multifamily real estate, and we still can do the construction, but in the meantime, we're still receiving some cash flow where we have other tenants that are paying the bills. So I was like, wow, I don't have to carry this 800-pound gorilla on my back the whole time. I can do these bigger properties, maybe work on 10 units a month, have the other 90 tenants that are occupying the space and renting it out, paying the bills at the property, the mortgage, the taxes, the maintenance, while I'm still continuing to add value in those properties through renovating the units, doing the exterior things that need to be done so that people are proud to live in that space.
No,
So
that cash flow thing there is a key ingredient to making it work. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned how in the beginning you recognized the risk you were taking on. At what point did you have the aha or experience the upside of having a larger property that had cash flow while you were doing the renovations?
Yeah, so a really good question. We had done another property where we did, blew out the back, the top, dug out the basement. And during that project, we had gotten into some difficult situations with the neighbors, and then they were going down to the local authority, which was DC at the time, and they ended up hitting our project with a stop work order, which meant we could not do anything on this project at all. And this was a project where we were planning on getting in and out in a year. We did a hard money loan on it. We paid 3 points down and 1 point a month. So we had a lot of fire, under our butt to get this thing done. And now all of a sudden we had to stop work order, and these people were not letting up. They were just continuing to complain and say we were changing the architectural elements of the building and all these things that were totally out of my control. And I was like, man, I don't ever want to be in a situation like this anymore, because we were paying all the bills, we were paying the mortgage, we were paying the insurance, we were paying for all the construction. Now we got hit with the stop work order and there's no income coming in. And I came across this podcast, and then that's why I love doing these things, because there's just so much value, especially when that one person gets that aha, because I was that person that got that aha. And I heard this guy talking about, these 100+ unit properties. And even if, 10 tenants or 10 tenants leave at the end of the month, you still have 90 tenants that are paying the bills. And then you could start renovating on those 10 units. And I was like, man, that sounds like a great idea. And I'd love to be in that situation right now, because it's much better than where I'm at. I'm having to pay these bills every month, whereas that guy has 90 other families helping him pay those bills every month while he still owns that asset. So that was the aha for me, when I was like, I'm doing the right things. I'm in the real estate. I'm adding value to projects, but there's a better way. And then that's when I found the multifamily game.
Got it. So in the quality construction, I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned, you kind of try to do it like you would expect for, if your mom was living there. I'm kind of curious though, on a cost basis, do you have a sense of the difference between the cost to do it the way you're doing it with quality materials, quality finishes, quality construction, versus more of like a builder grade, get it done and move on to the next one?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And what we mean by like quality is like hardening the unit. Yeah, we can go in and spend, $500 on laminate countertops, or we could go in and spend, $1,000 to $1,500 on a granite countertop. Now that unit, I'm not going to have to, when that person, if that tenant moves out, I'm not going to have to deal with all these burn marks all over the countertops. I'm not going to have to deal with, the laminate flaking off or peeling off. Yes, there is a higher cost up front, but over the long run, which I'm looking at, 5 years to 5 to 10 years when we're in these properties doing our value add, that unit's I'm not gonna have to replace that countertop again.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And is your strategy more of a buy and hold thing, or when you get into the multifamily, are you syndicating these properties? How are you going about raising the capital and acquiring the properties?
Yeah, they're done through the syndication model. And we buy these properties. We have typically a 5 to 7 year pro forma on the property. After, the value add usually takes, 1 to 3 years to complete. And once we complete that value add, we're starting to field offers. But if we don't get anything that we like, we just refinance, take the cash out and roll to the next property and just manage the asset, and continue just to collect cash flow from the asset.
Got it. And as the market has continued to evolve and, competition for properties and that, is there a particular, like a type of property that you found? Or, I mean, you mentioned kind of the age, anything from 70s to the 2000s. Is there any like location type that you found that works better? Are you going into like any? Well, I guess you with 70s, you wouldn't necessarily go into be to gentrified neighborhoods, but is it basically suburban, urban? What's kind of your model as far as where you're finding your properties?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we've actually done it a little bit of both. So like we've never, like the properties I was buying here in Washington, DC, they were right in urban center downtown. And the price point per unit was significantly higher. For example, a unit here in DC is $500,000 a unit. So if you have a 3-unit building, that each unit's $1 million, and each unit's at 500 grand, it's $1.5 million. Whereas you can go down to Atlanta, which is not downtown, but like in, like an East Point area or one of those areas like that. And you could go down there and buy those exact, a unit at $90,000. So like what I was doing is trading out of these higher cost of living places, not as friendly from a regulatory standpoint, high tax states, and flowing our capital down to like the Atlanta markets or the Houston market or the Austin market, and being able to distribute out that risk over more units versus just one unit here in Washington, DC, or a few units. We could get way more units, or we make way more bang for our buck down in the South. Basically that the bottom part of like a smile, the Florida, Atlanta, Texas areas.
Got it. So you mentioned 100 units is kind of the focal point of the properties you're working on. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah.
And as far as the strategy, when you acquire a property, do you have like just kind of a general sense of what your CapEx will be and what you hope that your exit will be in relationship to your acquisition price?
Yeah, we definitely put together a budget in the beginning of what we're going to be spending on, exteriors, what we're going to be spending on interiors, what we're going to do on the interior. Like there was a property that we bought in Atlanta 2 years ago, and it was 152 units. That property had 30 down units. So there was a lot bigger of a budget that was going into the interiors there than we were putting on the exterior, because the exterior looked pretty good. Actually, they had taken all the T111 siding off. They had done some roof work, even though we still need to go in there and do a little bit more. But a lot of the work that needed to be done at that property was going to be on the interior. So our budget for the interiors was much higher than just going in and just doing a unit turn or updating the kitchen here and there, doing flooring. So actually a cool story on that property that we bought in Atlanta. The reason why they had 30 down units is because some of those units were in the basement or the lower level, and they had water infiltration, which created a mold situation in multiple of those units. So when we bought that property, I was actually excited because I had previously dealt with a situation with water coming into the basement on one of my smaller units here in DC. We had renovated this place; it was brand new. We had the tenant move in, and we had been doing construction in there for over a year. It was closer to like year and a half, 2 years. And the first day the tenant comes in, he calls us and he's like, "I got water in the basement." We never had water at all during construction, but the first day the tenant moves in, we had water in the basement. So obviously I was like, "Oh crap, what was," and these smaller units, the reason why I don't like them as well is because like we had to self-manage these things to really make money with them. So the phone call actually came to me, where it's like, these bigger properties, the phone call comes to the property manager, and then we're driving the property manager to the end result. So this phone call came to me, and we had to go in there and clean this thing up. And the learnings that I got from that basement flooding is the exact same learnings that I was now able to multiply over like 15 of those 30 down units in that property in Atlanta. And we were able to bring those things online. And all of a sudden now we have 15 units paying $1,000 a month, dropping right to the bottom line. So it definitely had a massive impact on the value of that property. Another cool thing about that property in Atlanta is the reason why we even were able to get it is because a lot of groups there was like 2 or 3 groups that already had that under contract, but they backed out because they were afraid of that water damage. So that thing that I was crying about when I got that phone call actually became the thing that drove a lot of value at that Atlanta property.
No, that's awesome. A little bit of experience kind of separates you from the competition when when you have a sense of how to overcome something, as opposed to, the others who are like, I don't know what to do about that. That's good. Let me ask you this. So when you acquire a property, you do your renovations. Is that primarily your value add strategy, is to improve the unit, get the rents up? Is that kind of the your strategy as far as your thesis and how you guys are trying to operate?
Yeah, that's definitely 100% correct. And we
Okay.
also love like when we got like some management efficiencies that we can capture. And we're always looking to streamline and automate things from a management standpoint. But yeah, construction is where we really create a lot of our value.
Okay.
It's becoming more and more difficult. I mean, like the supply chain is becoming a problem. So we're having to get creative. I mean, there's situations now where we're looking at all the appliances and seeing how we can reuse existing appliances, because you try to call and get any of this stuff and they're telling you it's 6 months out or it's 4 months out. So we have to plan ahead. We have a lot more planning to do, a lot more communication with our internal team and the team on site, so that we have the appliances, the products that we need on site to actually get the unit rental ready.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Do you have any kind of sense of, for a dollar invested in the renovations, kind of a percentage rent increase you expect to get, or maybe if you just say like, we spend X on renovation per unit, that equals X percent rent increase, and how that translates into the value. Do you have any kind of a general, when you're, if you're looking for a property based on all the numbers you've done, that you would expect?
Yeah, we're looking for a 20 to 25% return on the money that we invest. So if we go in and invest, $100,000, we're looking to get a return on that investment of $20,000 to $25,000 a year. Yeah, to continue to drive that value and just compound that over time.
Got it. And that's the revenue percentage, or is that the value?
Uh, that's
Or
like a revenue percentage. Yeah.
okay, got it, got it. Now I'd say that the management stuff, if you can find that, to me is kind of like the gravy or the icing on top. Whereas the value add stuff, when you're having to physically change things and the capital improvement budget, capex budget, that kind of thing. That's I mean, you can see it because you're obviously you're changing the appearance in that, and hopefully you're creating a more desirable space that somebody's willing to pay more for.
Yeah.
In the work that you've done, it sounded like is a lot of or percentage wise, exterior to interior. Um, Overall, do you have a sense for how much of the budget you're putting towards exteriors versus interiors?
We're probably 70-30. So 70% of our the money that we're spending, we're going to the interiors, and 30% is going to the exteriors. And the reason we look at it that way is, most tenants don't want to pay to have a new roof, like, but they'll pay to have new flooring. They'll pay to have a new fan in their unit. They'll pay to have better lighting. They'll pay to have granite countertops. They'll pay to have, stainless steel appliances. But they're not going to pay to have, a new window,
Right.
So we focus on, spending 70% of our money on the interiors. The 30% on the exteriors is really to protect the money that we put on the interiors. Like, for example, we had a property that the roofs were leaking. So like, it didn't make sense to go and do anything on those interiors if the roof leaks were just going to destroy it. So we go in, we do all the harden the exteriors so that we don't have any water infiltration issues. So that when we do invest this money on the inside, it's actually protected and we don't have to worry about redoing this work.
No, I'm a fan of your thinking there. I've always kind of made it a kind of a policy with my renovations that if you're opening a wall and it's old and it's inside, if we're going in there to replace something and you see like some old waistlines that look like they're rusty, replace them. Let's not do all the work only to find out we've got a water leak inside the totally redone unit kind of thing. So I hear you. So tell me a little bit about any of your syndications as far as the raising capital, your team financing. How's that been? And going from the single families and the smaller units, were you doing those on your own, or did you have a team that you were doing those with, or how did you go from that to this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I was doing those single families and the duplexes, the triplexes, and the quads, it was all me, and my wife was a part of that as well. And there was the problem with that was that anytime there ever was an issue, it was my wife getting a phone call or me getting a phone call, and we were constantly trying to grow, and then we were just getting pulled back into the minutia of all of these investments. So, when I heard that podcast, I then started to go to like the multifamily events, and then I started to see like, oh wow, this is a team game. All of a sudden you buy a big enough property, you buy one property, and you have 10 partners. Now all of a sudden you have 10 people working on one problem versus one person working on 10 problems. Where I was like, I want to be on that side of the equation where we got 10 people and we're just, everybody is focusing on what they're really good at. Like, I got partners that are really good at operations, and I'm really good at construction. Then I had another partner that's really good at dealing with the banks and filling out all the loan requests and making sure our draws are on time and all that stuff. So we can now focus and be extremely intentional about what we're really good at and come together and create a bigger result together. So I was doing those smaller properties here in DC, and where I met my partners was on a 282 unit deal down in San Antonio, Texas. And we were all excited, like there was a lot of, value to be created there. It was a 1970s built property. There's a lot of opportunity there. And we came together on that property, and we continued to execute. We turned that property around. There was a bigger bigger team that had that, and they just didn't really have their full attention on it. And we were able to go in there and turn it around. We created a really good relationship. At the same time, we had bought that unit, those apartments up there in Atlanta, 152 units. And then so they were boots on the ground there, and I was boots on the ground in Atlanta. And we just continued to develop the team and develop our communication and develop like what we were really excited about. And as we continued to develop that, like the dream and the goal got so much bigger than it ever would have when it was just me alone. Because when it was just me alone, I just wanted to get, like 10 units or 20 units. Now all of a sudden we were like, we had like almost 1,000 units. And it was just, now it's, and the same thing is even happening now. It's like, we continue to double down on the business plan. We created a fund, a three building fund this past year. And it was 128 units, 198 units, 182 units. So now all of a sudden, instead of just buying one by itself, we bought three together, and it just continued to double down on what we're really good at, and focus on that. And that's like, something that's been a driver in my life since day one, is like being extremely intentional about where you want to go, putting all your energy and effort behind it, and then finding other people that want to come along with you. It's like, I'm allergic to like small minds, like it just doesn't work. Like, when you're thinking big and someone else is thinking small. So it's like putting yourself around big thinkers, but also someone that's willing, that knows how to get from point A to Z, and someone that you don't need to constantly babysit. And that's kind of how we've grown the partnership and continue to do deals together.
Got it. So it sounded like there are three guys or three individuals on your team essentially. Is
Yeah.
that the okay? And you as an investor, when you were doing your properties alone, how do you see like the rewards to you? I mean, the financial rewards going on as a team, doing these syndications versus doing the one at a time on your own kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So when we were doing doing deals by ourselves, we did really well with that. I'm actually in the property that I first renovated here in Washington, D.C. And while I was doing it, I was like 22, 23 years old. And I was in the back alleyway here, and it was, throwing some trash away. And I ran into one of the neighbors, and that neighbor, he was kind of like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he saw that, told him about the project we were doing up the street. And he asked if he could come see it, because he had been in the neighborhood for a while, and he saw all the destruction and the drugs, all of the crime that was going on in the area. And when he came in, he's like, "Oh my God, you did this!" And like, he couldn't believe like that we were transforming this, the way we were transforming this property. So when, after he came in, we exchanged phone numbers, and we continued to develop our relationship. And I remember just calling him. He was a 90-year-old World War II vet. And I would literally sit my phone in the cup holder while I was going to and from work, and he would just, talk and tell me all these crazy stories. But it turns out he ended up owning 2 properties down the street, and he ended up owner financing those properties to me. And I was telling you, I was like 22, 23 years old, put down $20,000, and it was like $1 million worth of real estate, unfinished at the time. And we had to go in there and do construction. I mean, the properties were disgusting. I mean, I don't even know how he was even living in there. I oftentimes will tell some of my team members, like, the way he would shower, he had this water line that was running through the property, and he literally cut in a hose bin.
Oh my God.
Hot water. And he'd literally go into the basement and turn on the valve, and then the water would come down, and that's when he'd shower, created like a little pit. But so these properties needed a ton of work. They needed, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get back into a livable condition. But it was that opportunity that he gave us was amazing at the time. And those properties, I mean, we refinanced out $500,000 out of one, $500,000 out of the other. So like, you own properties by yourself, it's, there's definitely money there. The problem that I had though was that all of the problems and all of the questions and all of the driving of the project came from me, and I wanted to build a team. I wanted to do something where I was starting to separate my income generation from my time. And these larger projects have helped me separate my income generation from my time. So that if when the opportunity comes and I want to, and I will then have the ability to step away from that, but then still have all this income generation coming to me.
Right. No, the kind of the yin and yang, I think you've identified it well, is that, going alone is you're going alone and it's all yours. I mean, the good and the bad. But having kind of a larger scale with a team, you have the opportunity to separate and operate more like a business rather than everything's, um, you get the call, you get to deal with it, you get to do all the stress, all the pain, all the agony, and the reward. So that I get it. I think it makes a lot of sense. Where do you see yourself going here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we're doubling down on the construction side. During COVID, we saw like what was important, food, water, shelter. So real estate is extremely important. They told everybody to stay inside. And only reason you could leave is if you needed to go to the grocery store for food and water. So I saw how important real estate is, especially housing, multifamily real estate, residential real estate. And then I also saw how important construction was, because I mean during that same time, everybody wanted to get their projects done. So we're doubling down on our construction business, really going after a ton of projects that are really focused on what we're really good at, and continuing to build that vehicle to continue to put money into real estate and continue to grow and scale the team on the real estate side as well.
No, that's great. That's great. Hey, Oliver, if we could, I'd like to shift gears here for a second. By day, I'm an insurance broker, and I work with my clients to assess risk and determine what to do with the risk. And there's 3 different strategies we typically consider. We first look to see if there's a way we can avoid the risk. And when that's not an option, then we look to see if there's a way we can minimize the risk. And if we cannot avoid nor minimize the risk, then we look to see if there's a way we can transfer the risk. And that's what an insurance policy is. It's a risk transfer vehicle. And as such, I like to ask my guests if they can look at their own situation. Could be their clients, investors, the market, tenants, political issues, geopolitical issues, and identify what you consider to be the biggest risk that you face. And again, for clarification, while I am an insurance agent, I'm not necessarily looking for an insurance related answer. And so if you're willing, I'd like to ask you, Oliver Fernandez, what is the biggest risk?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. And my mind went a couple different directions, but the direction that it just keeps going back to is the biggest risk is not being intentional about what you want to do. And the reason why that's the biggest risk is because when you become 80, 90, 100, or whatever your time is, and you look back on your life and you're like, did I do everything I wanted to do? I don't want to ever be in a situation where I was like, man, I could have done this differently, or I could have done that differently, or I didn't really focus on what I wanted to do here. I didn't want to focus on what I want to do there. I want to look back and just say I was super intentional. I did everything that I said I wanted to do, and I didn't leave any stone unturned. I didn't leave any opportunity that I really was excited about it, but I didn't have the courage to go for it. Like I don't want to be in that situation. So like I want to focus on being extremely intentional about my life, where I want to go, where I want my family to go, where I want my team to go, where I want my businesses to go. Because I also know the opposite side of that. When you're not intentional and you're just letting the world just kind of control you and put you in situations, and that's never a good situation. So the biggest risk is not being intentional about life.
Very well said. Hey, Oliver, where can listeners go if they'd like to learn more or connect with you?
Yeah, if you want to connect with me, you can reach out to me at www.investwitholiver.com.
All right. Oliver, I cannot say thanks enough for taking the time to talk today. I've enjoyed our talk. I learned a lot and look forward to doing it again soon.
Looking forward to it as well.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.